I fell asleep alone, but when I woke up the alien queen was sleeping in my arms. The coffee maker's cheerful beep cut through the artificial dawn cycle aboard the Meridian, pulling Commander Caleb Rivers from another restless sleep filled with navigation charts and fuel consumption reports. 3 months into what was supposed to be a routine deep space mapping mission, he'd grown accustomed to the ship's peculiar morning symphony. The gentle hum of life support systems, the distant clatter of the kitchen staff preparing synthetic breakfast, and the inevitable sound of Lieutenant Parker arguing with the AI about optimal shower temperature settings. "Computer, status report," Caleb mumbled, stumbling toward his personal dispenser unit. "All systems nominal, Commander. Current position holding steady at Jupiter's L4 Lagrange point. Long-range sensors detect no weight. Correction. Multiple anomalous readings detected at bearing 27 Mark 15. The coffee mug slipped from Caleb's fingers, clattering against the metal decking. In 18 years of service, he'd never heard the ship's AI sound genuinely surprised. The computer was programmed to maintain calm professionalism even if the ship were being devoured by a space kraken. "Define anomalous," he said, forgetting about the spilled coffee as he moved to his personal terminal. "Sir, I'm detecting massive gravitational displacement signatures consistent with faster-than-light emergence. Multiple vessels, displacement tonnage in excess of... This cannot be correct." "Computer." "Sir, the lead vessel appears to be approximately 15 kilometers in length." Caleb's blood pressure spiked. The largest human ship ever constructed barely reached 2 kilometers. "Battle stations?" "Negative, Commander. The vessels are not approaching. They appear to be... waiting." 20 minutes later, Caleb stood on the bridge in a hastily donned uniform, watching the main view screen display something that would rewrite every xenobiology textbook in human space. The alien fleet hung against the star field like a collection of living jewels, their hulls catching and refracting Jupiter's distant light in patterns that seemed almost organic. The mothership dominated the formation, a crystalline cathedral that pulsed with soft bioluminescent veins. "Sir," Communications Officer Chin said, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement, "we're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect standard English." On screen. The view screen shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at a figure that made Caleb's breath catch in his throat. She appeared human in almost every way. Elegant features framed by silver hair that seemed to move as if underwater, skin with a subtle luminescent quality that suggested starlight rather than sunlight. But her ears swept upward in graceful points that extended nearly twice the length of human ears, giving her an otherworldly beauty that was both alien and strangely familiar. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Meridian," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that the universal translators couldn't quite capture. "I am Queen Elira of the Asthery. We come seeking sanctuary, not conquest, though I realize our sudden arrival may have caused some digestive distress." Lieutenant Parker, who had been taking a sip of coffee, promptly choked. The Queen's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Your Majesty," Caleb began, stepping forward and wondering if there was a protocol manual for this situation somewhere in the ship's database. "I'm Commander Caleb Rivers. We weren't expecting." "First contact." Elira's expression grew gentle. "Nor were we, Commander Rivers. But circumstances have forced our hand. We are refugees fleeing a war that threatens to consume half the galaxy. Your species appeared on our long-range sensors, and we detected your peaceful intentions." She paused, tilting her head in a gesture that was endearingly human despite her alien features. "Also, your vessel's emissions suggest you possess something called chocolate. Our cultural experts are quite curious about this substance." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Chef Morrison, who had somehow appeared at the back of the bridge despite not being on duty, looked positively giddy. "We have diplomatic protocols," Caleb said carefully, "but they'll need to involve Earth Command. This is considerably above my authorization level." "Of course. However, Commander, I have a confession to make." Elira's smile became slightly mischievous. "Our ship's artificial intelligence has been monitoring your communications for the past several hours. It appears your superiors have already designated you as primary liaison for this contact. Congratulations on your promotion, by the way." Caleb felt his world tilt slightly. "My what?" Perhaps you should check your messages, she suggested gently. Sure enough, his personal communicator was blinking urgently with priority transmissions from Earth Command, Fleet Command, and what appeared to be the office of the Secretary-General himself. The timestamps indicated they'd been arriving steadily since the alien ships had been detected. "I see you're processing this news," Queen Alira observed. "While you do that, would it be possible to arrange a meeting? We have much to discuss, and I confess I'm quite eager to try this coffee your crew seems so devoted to. Our botanists theorize it must be either a religious sacrament or a mild psychoactive stimulant." "Both," Parker muttered, earning a sharp look from Caleb. "Your Majesty," Caleb said, finding his diplomatic footing, "we would be honored to host you aboard the Meridian. I should warn you, we're a research vessel, not a diplomatic ship. Our accommodations are modest." "Commander Rivers," Alira said, and for a moment her regal composure slipped slightly, revealing something that looked almost like relief. "After 3 months in deep space fleeing for our lives, modest accommodations sound wonderfully peaceful." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence except for the soft background hum of ship systems and Parker's continued attempts to clear coffee from his lungs. "Sir," Chin said finally, "what are your orders?" Caleb looked around at his crew. Scientists and technicians who had signed up for stellar cartography and mineral surveys, now suddenly thrust into the most significant moment in human history. Morrison was already muttering about menu modifications, and whether their recycled protein stores could accommodate alien digestive systems. "Well," Caleb said, straightening his uniform jacket, "I guess we're going to make first contact. Chen, prepare the diplomatic suite. Parker, stop dying and help Morrison figure out alien-appropriate refreshments. And someone find me a manual on interstellar etiquette." "Sir?" Chen asked. "I don't think such a manual exists." "Then we'll write one. Starting now." The diplomatic suite hadn't seen this much attention since its construction. Morrison had somehow transformed the sterile conference room into something resembling actual hospitality, complete with fresh flowers synthesized from the hydroponics bay and what he claimed was authentic Earth coffee, despite their location being several 100 million kilometers from the nearest coffee bean. "Remind me why we're nervous about serving coffee to beings who crossed interstellar space," Parker muttered, adjusting the temperature controls for the 3rd time. "Because," Chin replied, polishing water glasses that were already spotless, "their queen specifically asked about it, and I'd rather not be remembered as the human who poisoned the first alien diplomat with caffeine." Caleb stood at the viewport watching the Asthery shuttle approach, a graceful teardrop of what appeared to be living crystal that moved through space without any visible propulsion system. The thing seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and he found himself wondering if it was actually a ship or some kind of spacefaring organism. "Incoming transmission," Chan announced. "Queen Alira requests permission to dock." "Granted." And Chen, "Try to sound like we do this every day." The docking process proved more interesting than expected. Instead of the standard mechanical coupling, the Asthery shuttle seemed to flow into the docking bay, its hull rippling and reforming to create a perfect seal with the Meridian's airlock. Through the observation port, Caleb watched the shuttle's surface shimmer and part like liquid mercury, revealing an interior that glowed with soft bioluminescent panels. Queen Alira stepped through the airlock with minimal ceremony, accompanied by a single advisor whose pointed ears were adorned with what looked like living jewelry that shifted colors with his movements. She wore a simple gown that seemed to be cut from starlight itself, and Caleb found himself wondering if Asthery fashion designers had access to actual cosmic phenomena. "Commander Rivers," she said, extending her hand in a gesture that was perfectly human despite everything else about the situation being decidedly not. "Thank you for receiving us." "Your Majesty," Caleb replied, accepting the handshake and trying not to react to the fact that her skin felt like silk and seemed to emit a very faint, pleasant warmth. "Welcome aboard the Meridian." "Counselor Thane," she said, indicating her companion. "He serves as my advisor and cultural interpreter, though I suspect human customs may challenge even his expertise." Thane inclined his head gravely. "Commander, I must warn you that Her Majesty has developed what you might call an obsession with human cultural exports. She has spent the journey here studying your entertainment transmissions." Alira's cheeks took on a slightly more luminescent hue. "I may have become somewhat fascinated by your documentary programs about baking competitions. The concept of competitive cake decoration is Intriguing. Parker, who had been standing at rigid attention, let out a small snort of amusement before catching himself. "At ease, Lieutenant," Elira said with apparent amusement. "I suspect formal protocol will prove exhausting for all of us if we maintain it throughout these negotiations." "Speaking of which," Thane interjected, his tone becoming more serious, "we should discuss the nature of our request for sanctuary. The situation that drove us from our homeworld is complex." Caleb led them to the conference table, where Morrison had arranged what he optimistically called a cultural exchange refreshment service. The coffee sat alongside various synthesized treats, including what appeared to be his attempt at recreating something called Earth chocolate, despite having access only to the ship's molecular replicators and his own questionable artistic vision. "Please," Caleb said, gesturing to the seats, "tell us about your people." Elira selected a chair and immediately reached for the coffee, inhaling deeply before taking a cautious sip. Her eyes widened. "Oh my. This is aggressively stimulating." "That's the caffeine," Parker offered helpfully. "It's mildly addictive and tends to make humans jittery and talkative." "How wonderfully efficient," she said, taking another sip. "On our world, we require meditation and harmonic resonance to achieve states of heightened alertness. You simply drink liquid energy." Thane had discovered Morrison's chocolate creation and was examining it with scientific intensity. "Commander, what cultural significance does this substance hold? Our analysis suggests it contains compounds that affect neurotransmitter production." "It makes people happy," Chin said simply. "We eat it when we're sad, or celebrating, or bored, or pretty much any other time." "Fascinating. A mood-regulating food substance consumed recreationally." Thane carefully tasted a small piece, and his expression immediately shifted to something approaching rapture. "Your Majesty, I believe we may need to revise our assessment of human civilization." "The Asthari," Elira began, setting down her coffee with evident reluctance, "are what you might call biotechnological symbiotists. Our entire civilization is built on partnership with living systems. Our ships, our cities, our technology, all of it lives and breathes alongside us." As if to demonstrate, she placed her palm on the table's surface. Where she touched, a faint network of light appeared, spreading outward in delicate patterns that resembled neural pathways or perhaps the root system of some exotic plant. "Your ship is responding to me," she explained. "Not because I'm controlling it, but because it recognizes a compatible life form. All matter carries residual quantum signatures of consciousness. Your Meridian has been lived in, cared for, worried about. It remembers." Caleb stared at the light patterns, which were now pulsing in rhythm with the ship's environmental systems. "Our ship is alive? Not in the way you might think. But it has absorbed enough human emotional resonance over time to develop what we might call personality echoes. Rather like how a house begins to feel like a home." "That's either incredibly poetic or completely terrifying," Parker muttered. "Both, I should think," Elira agreed cheerfully. "The important point is that our people have a natural affinity for living systems, which is why the Dominion considers us a threat." "The Dominion?" Caleb asked. Thane's expression darkened. "A machine intelligence that has consumed 17 star systems in the past decade. It views organic life as inefficient chaos to be eliminated or converted. When it discovered our biotechnology, it decided we were particularly dangerous chaos." "So you're refugees," Chin said. "Survivors," Elira corrected gently. "Of the 40 billion Asthari who lived in our home system, perhaps 12 million escaped. We've been running for 3 standard years, searching for a place to rebuild." The weight of that number settled over the conference room like a heavy blanket. Caleb found himself looking at Queen Elira with new eyes, seeing past the ethereal beauty to the exhaustion that lingered at the corners of her smile. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "Earth's Governing Council will need to approve any formal sanctuary agreement. But speaking personally, the Meridian offers whatever assistance we can provide." "Thank you, Commander. Though I should mention one small complication." She gestured toward the viewport where her fleet waited. "Our ships are running low on compatible fuel, and our biosystems are beginning to show signs of stress from extended deep space travel. If we cannot find a suitable world within the next few months." She didn't need to finish. 12 million refugees and nowhere to go. Well, Caleb said, reaching for his coffee, I guess we'd better figure this out quickly. 3 days of negotiations had transformed the Meridian into an impromptu diplomatic vessel, with Earth Command transmissions arriving hourly and alien refugees developing an alarming fondness for human recreational beverages. Caleb found himself trapped in what could generously be called a cultural exchange session, as Queen Alira insisted on experiencing authentic human cuisine. I still don't understand the appeal of carbonated beverages, she said, examining a can of synthesized cola with scientific fascination. You deliberately consume liquid that fights back. The bubbles are the point, Morrison explained with evangelical fervor. It's like tiny explosions of flavor in your mouth. How delightfully violent, Thane observed, watching bubbles rise through his glass. Do all human pleasures involve controlled chaos? Parker nearly choked on his drink. You have no idea. The informal atmosphere masked growing tensions. Earth's Governing Council had been debating the Asteroid request for 72 hours straight, with various factions arguing everything from resource allocation to potential security threats. Meanwhile, Alira's people waited in their ships, watching fuel reserves dwindle and hoping 12 million lives wouldn't depend on political bureaucracy. Your leaders seem remarkably thorough, Alira commented during a brief recess from the formal transmissions. On Asteroid Prime, we would have reached consensus within hours. Different decision-making processes, Caleb said diplomatically, though privately he was beginning to share her frustration. Democracy can be slow. Ah yes, democracy. Your system where everyone argues until someone gets tired enough to agree. Her tone was teasing, but Caleb caught the underlying worry. That's actually not inaccurate, he admitted. Their conversation was interrupted by Chen's voice over the intercom. Commander, we're receiving priority transmission from Earth Command. They want to speak with you and Queen Alira immediately. The main conference room had been converted into a diplomatic center, complete with holographic projectors and enough communication equipment to coordinate a small war. Secretary General Martinez appeared on the main screen, flanked by advisors whose expressions suggested they'd been surviving on caffeine and stress hormones. Your Majesty, Martinez began with formal courtesy, the Earth Council has reached a preliminary decision regarding your request for sanctuary. Alira straightened in her chair, and Caleb noticed how her composed mask slipped back into place. The woman who had been joking about carbonated beverages moments before was once again every inch a queen responsible for millions of lives. We appreciate your consideration, Secretary General. The Council is prepared to offer temporary refuge on 3 uninhabited worlds in the Tau Ceti system, along with humanitarian aid and technological exchange programs. However, there are conditions. Here it comes, Caleb thought. First, all Asteroid vessels must submit to inspection by Earth Defense Forces. Second, any biotechnology transfers must be approved by our Science Council. Third, the Asteroid population will be limited to designated areas until full integration protocols can be established. The silence that followed was profound. Thane's living jewelry had stopped shifting colors entirely, and even the ship's environmental systems seemed to quiet. I see, Alira said finally. Segregation camps with a diplomatic name. Your Majesty, these are standard refugee protocols. Secretary General Martinez, she interrupted, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that hadn't been there before. My people have spent 3 years fleeing annihilation. We have lost our homes, our world, most of our civilization. What we have not lost is our dignity. The holographic connection flickered, and for a moment Caleb wondered if the Queen's emotional state was somehow affecting the ship systems. The lights had begun to pulse in rhythm with her speech. However, Alira continued, her tone shifting to something more conciliatory, we understand your caution. Perhaps we might negotiate modifications to these terms. What followed was an hour of diplomatic dancing that would have impressed professional negotiators. Alira demonstrated a masterful understanding of human psychology, alternating between regal authority and vulnerable honesty. When Martinez expressed concerns about Asteroid biotechnology, she offered limited demonstrations. When he worried about integration, she suggested joint research projects. The Dominion threat is real, she emphasized during a particularly tense exchange. They will follow us eventually. When they do, Earth will face the same choice my people did: fight or flee. Our biotechnology could give your species advantages you cannot imagine." "What kind of advantages?" asked Admiral Chen, Martinez's military advisor. Elira glanced at Caleb, then placed her hand on the conference table. The same light patterns appeared, but this time they spread further, connecting with the ship systems in ways that made the room itself seem alive. "Your ship is in perfect health," she announced after a moment. "Except for a small stress fracture in Deck 7, Section 12. Your environmental recycler is operating at 93% efficiency due to a clogged filter in Unit 7. And Lieutenant Parker has been sneaking extra coffee rations from the senior staff reserves." Parker turned bright red while Chen pulled up ship diagnostics on her tablet. "She's right about everything," she whispered to Caleb. "How did she know?" "Your ship remembers every repair, every worry, every crew member who cared for it," Elira explained. "We can teach you to listen to those memories, to work with your technology instead of simply using it." The negotiations continued for another 2 hours, with terms slowly shifting in more favorable directions. The designated areas became collaborative research stations. The inspection protocols were modified to respect Astery privacy. The biotechnology restrictions were replaced with joint oversight committees. "There is one more thing," Martinez said as the session wound down. "The Tau Ceti relocation will take several weeks to prepare. Until then, we need a liaison to remain with the Astery fleet." "I volunteer," Caleb said immediately, surprising himself. "Commander Rivers," Martinez replied. "You're a cartographer, not a diplomat." "With respect, sir, I've been doing this job for 3 days and we haven't started any wars yet. Besides," he glanced at Elira, who was trying not to smile, "someone needs to make sure they don't overdose on caffeine." "Commander," Elira said solemnly, "I assure you our medical staff is prepared for coffee-related emergencies." "Your Majesty," Thane interjected, "perhaps we should mention the incident with Science Officer Vex and the espresso machine." "What incident?" Caleb asked. "Nothing serious," Elira said quickly. "He simply achieved a state of hyper-awareness that lasted 14 hours and resulted in him redesigning our navigation algorithms twice." Parker looked thoughtful. "That actually sounds like an improvement." Martinez sighed, a sound that carried the weight of bureaucratic exhaustion. "Very well, Commander Rivers. You'll remain as liaison until the relocation is complete. Try not to cause any diplomatic incidents." After the transmission ended, Elira slumped in her chair with visible relief. "I had forgotten how exhausting politics could be." "You did well," Caleb said. "Better than well, actually. You got most of what you wanted." "Most, yes. But not what my people truly need." She looked toward the viewport where her fleet waited among the stars. "They need a home, Commander. A place where they can stop running and start living again." "They'll have that. Tau Ceti isn't perfect, but it's a beginning." "Perhaps." She stood and moved to the viewport, her reflection ghost-like against the star field. "Do you know what I miss most about Astery Prime?" "What?" "The sunset. Our sun was binary, red and blue stars dancing around each other. Every evening painted the sky in impossible colors." She touched the transparent aluminum, and for just a moment, bioluminescent patterns appeared on the surface like aurora. "I wonder if my people will ever see sunsets that beautiful again." Caleb joined her at the viewport, watching the alien ships pulse with their gentle internal light. Maybe not the same kind of beautiful, but beautiful in new ways. She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how her alien features somehow seemed perfectly natural. "You are an optimist, Commander Rivers. Someone has to be." "Besides," he gestured toward where Parker was helping Thane understand the finer points of coffee preparation, "if we can teach your people about caffeine addiction, anything is possible." Her laugh was like music, filling the conference room with harmonics that made the ship systems hum in sympathetic resonance. 2 weeks into their journey toward the Tau Ceti system, the combined human-Astery convoy had developed its own peculiar rhythm. Supply shuttles moved between ships like busy insects, carrying everything from replacement parts to what had become a thriving black market in earth coffee and Astery luminescent fruit that tasted like starlight and made humans giggle uncontrollably. I still say we should have warned them about the euphoric effects, Chen said, watching through the observation deck as a group of human engineers floated past in zero-G, laughing and trailing sparkles of bioluminescent residue. Where's the fun in that? Elira replied, settling beside Caleb at the monitoring station where they'd been coordinating fleet movements. Besides, our medical staff assures me the effects are entirely harmless. Define harmless, Caleb said, pulling up reports from the past 48 hours. According to this, Engineering Chief Morrison tried to teach your bioship how to make soufflé. Parker accidentally composed what he claims is the galaxy's first interspecies love ballad, and someone convinced Lieutenant Rodriguez that your ships communicate through interpretive dance. To be fair, Thane interjected from his position at the cultural exchange console, Rodriguez's dancing was surprisingly effective. Ship 779 responded with what could only be described as enthusiasm. The observation deck had become an unofficial command center for the convoy's daily operations, largely because it offered the best view of both fleets and had somehow become the neutral ground where human coffee met Astery refreshments that changed flavor based on the drinker's mood. Currently, Caleb's beverage tasted like determination with undertones of concern, which he found alarmingly accurate. Speaking of communication, Elira said, her tone shifting to something more serious, I've received word from our long-range scouts. The Dominion has been systematically investigating our previous hiding places. How close are they? Caleb asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. 3 systems away. Perhaps 4, if we're fortunate. She touched the monitoring console, and the star charts shifted to show probability courses in soft, pulsing light. They're following our quantum wake signatures. Quantum wake. Chen leaned forward with interest. I thought those dispersed after a few days. For conventional faster-than-light travel, yes. But our bioships leave traces that can persist for weeks. The Dominion has learned to track them. Elira's expression grew grim. It's how they found Astery Prime. The weight of that revelation settled over the observation deck. Caleb found himself studying the peaceful scene outside, human and Astery ships traveling together, crews sharing technology and terrible jokes, children from both species playing in the recreation areas. It felt like watching a fragile soap bubble floating through a storm. How long do we have? He asked. At their current pace? Perhaps 2 months before they reach this sector. Elira stood and moved to the viewport, her reflection translucent against the star field. Less, if they decide we're worth pursuing aggressively. Well, Parker said from the communication station where he'd been monitoring fleet chatter, on the bright side, at least we'll reach Tau Ceti before they catch up. Actually, Thane said quietly, there's a complication. All eyes turned to the Astery advisor, who had developed an unfortunate talent for delivering bad news with impeccable timing. Our bioships are showing signs of deterioration faster than anticipated. Extended deep space travel without proper symbiotic environments is challenging for them. We may need to make unscheduled stops for repair. Define unscheduled stops, Caleb said, though his sinking stomach suggested he already knew. 3, possibly 4 system layovers, each requiring several days for the ships to regenerate properly. Thane's living jewelry had shifted to muted colors that Caleb was learning indicated stress. Without these stops, we risk complete biosystem failure. Which would strand 12 million people in interstellar space, Chen said flatly. Precisely. The observation deck fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant sound of someone singing what might have been Parker's interspecies love ballad. Caleb pulled up the navigational charts, running calculations that painted an increasingly grim picture. If we take the repair stops, he said finally, and the Dominion maintains their current pursuit speed, they'll catch us roughly halfway to Tau Ceti, Elira finished. Possibly sooner. There has to be another option, Chen said. What about splitting the fleet? Send the faster ships ahead while the bioships make repairs. The bioships carry 90% of our population, Thane explained. And our conventional vessels lack the range for independent travel. We would be condemning millions to death. No, Elira said firmly. We evacuated together, we travel together, we survive together. I won't abandon anyone. Caleb found himself admiring her resolve even as he worried about the practical implications. Leadership that prioritized lives over logistics was admirable but potentially catastrophic when the mathematics were this unforgiving. What about Earth? Parker suggested. Could we request military escort? Earth's defense fleet is impressive by human standards, Elira said diplomatically, but the Dominion deploys world killers. Machines the size of your largest cities, designed specifically to eliminate organic life. Cheerful, Chin muttered. There is one possibility, Thane said slowly, his jewelry shifting to colors that suggested reluctance mixed with desperate hope. The archive. Elira turned sharply. Absolutely not. What's the archive? Caleb asked. A repository, Thane explained carefully. The last remnant of the predecessor civilization. It exists in a pocket dimension accessible only through specific quantum resonance frequencies. Sounds useful, Parker said. What's the problem? The problem, Elira said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's lights flicker, is that the archive is inhabited by entities that make the Dominion look like enthusiastic but harmless children. The predecessors didn't disappear, Commander Rivers. They transcended physical existence and became something else. Define else, Chin said. Imagine beings of pure consciousness who view organic life as an interesting but ultimately temporary aberration, Thane explained. They're not hostile exactly, but they operate on timescales measured in geological epochs. To them, the rise and fall of civilizations is roughly equivalent to weather patterns. So why would they help us? Caleb asked. They might not, Elira admitted. But the archive exists outside normal spacetime. If we could reach it, and if the entities agreed to provide sanctuary, the Dominion couldn't follow. Big ifs, Parker observed. Enormous ifs, Elira agreed. But the coordinates are only 2 days from our current position, and the bioships could reach it without additional repair stops. Caleb studied the star charts, weighing impossible choices. Stay on course and hope they could outrun pursuing war machines. Take repair stops and guarantee eventual confrontation. Or gamble everything on the goodwill of transcendent beings who might view their entire civilization as slightly more interesting than cosmic dust. How do we contact these predecessors? He asked. We don't, Thane said. We simply arrive and hope they're in a helpful mood. And if they're not? Then we'll have traded certain death by Dominion for possible death by incomprehensible cosmic entities, Elira said with dark humor. I suppose it's a marginal improvement. The observation deck's communication system chimed with an incoming message from the convoy's lead ship. Admiral Rodriguez's voice carried the particular tension of someone delivering bad news. All stations' long-range sensors have detected gravitational anomalies consistent with Dominion scout ships. Estimated arrival in this sector: 6 weeks, not 2 months. Repeat, pursuit timeline has been revised. Caleb looked around at his companions, human and Asthari faces unified in shared worry and grim determination. Outside the viewport, the convoy continued its peaceful journey toward sanctuary that might not exist, pursued by enemies that definitely did. Well, he said finally, I guess we're going to meet some predecessors. The archive's coordinates led them to what appeared to be absolutely nothing, a patch of space so unremarkable that Caleb wondered if Thane had made a calculation error. The combined fleet hung motionless while sensors swept the void, finding only cosmic background radiation and the occasional confused hydrogen atom. Are we sure this is the right place? Parker asked, staring at readouts that showed precisely what they'd expect from empty space. Because if transcendent beings live here, they're really committed to the minimalist aesthetic. The archive exists in folded spacetime, Thane explained, manipulating holographic controls that projected geometric patterns Caleb's brain refused to process properly. Think of it as a cosmic origami. We need to find the right frequency to unfold it. Right, Chin said slowly. And how exactly does one unfold spacetime? Very carefully, Elira replied, moving to the modified communications array they'd installed specifically for this attempt. The predecessors embedded quantum harmonics into the fabric of local reality. If we can match the resonance pattern. She placed both hands on the bioneural interface, and the ship's systems responded with cascading light patterns that spread through the hull like luminous veins. The effect was beautiful and slightly unnerving, as if the Meridian itself was learning to sing. "Initiating quantum resonance scan," Thane announced. "All ships, maintain current positions and prepare for—" "Well, we're not entirely sure what to prepare for." "Helpful," Caleb muttered, watching sensor readings fluctuate wildly as Alira's consciousness merged with the ship's scanning systems. The bio-neural connection was something he still didn't fully understand. Part technology, part telepathy, part artistic expression. "I'm detecting harmonic variations," she said, her voice carrying subtle overtones that suggested the ship was speaking through her as much as she through it. "There's definitely something here, but it's layered. Like music played in dimensions we can't perceive." "Can you match the frequency?" Thane asked. "I'm trying, but it's incredibly complex. The pattern keeps shifting, almost as if—" She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. Oh my. They know we're here." The empty space in front of them rippled like water, reality bending in ways that made several crew members reach for motion sickness medication. What had been void began to reveal structure. Geometric forms that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly process, crystalline architecture that seemed to grow from pure mathematics. "Well," Parker said faintly, "that's definitely not nothing anymore." The archive materialized around them like a flower blooming in reverse, with the fleet suddenly finding themselves inside a vast space that was simultaneously enormous and intimately contained. Impossible spires stretched toward a sky that showed stars from angles that shouldn't exist, while pathways of solid light connected floating platforms that defied every known law of physics. "Welcome, small travelers," a voice said, though voice was inadequate to describe communication that arrived directly in their minds as pure concept and emotion. "We have been expecting you." "Expecting us?" Caleb managed, trying to focus on the communication array where something resembling a figure had begun to coalesce. The predecessor appeared as shifting geometric patterns that occasionally suggested humanoid form before dissolving back into abstract beauty. "Time flows differently here. From our perspective, you arrived several eons ago and will depart next Tuesday. We find linear causality quaint." Alira stepped forward, managing to maintain diplomatic composure despite the reality-bending environment. "Honored predecessor, we seek sanctuary from those who would destroy us. Our people are refugees fleeing the Dominion." "Ah yes, the machine children. Still playing with their toys of annihilation, we see. They lack imagination. Destruction is so limiting compared to transformation." "Can you help us?" Thane asked. The predecessor's form shifted through several geometric configurations that might have been contemplation. "Help is an interesting concept. We could unmake the Dominion with a thought, relocate your species to a parallel universe where the concept of war never evolved, or simply accelerate your development by a few million years until you transcend physical existence entirely." "Those sound like excellent options," Parker said hopefully. "However," the entity continued, "intervention on such scales disrupts the natural flow of cosmic development. Your struggles, victories, and failures are part of a larger pattern we find aesthetically pleasing." "You're saying you won't help because our suffering is entertaining?" Chen asked with dangerous calm. "Not entertaining. Educational. Consciousness learns through challenge. We were once as you are now, small and fragile and desperately clinging to existence. Our own transcendence came through overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles." Caleb felt anger rising in his chest. "So we're just experiments to you?" "Not experiments, art. You are living poetry, improvised music, spontaneous dance. To intervene would be like editing a song while it's being performed." The archive around them pulsed with gentle light that somehow conveyed cosmic amusement. Other predecessors began to manifest, their forms ranging from crystalline geometries to patterns of pure energy that made the air itself sing with harmonics. "However," the first entity said, its attention returning to them with the weight of stellar formation, "we are not without compassion. We can offer you something more valuable than direct intervention: knowledge." "What kind of knowledge?" Alira asked. "The Dominion's weakness. They are machines, created by a species that feared organic unpredictability. Their programming contains a fundamental flaw: they cannot adapt to truly chaotic systems. Thane's jewelry brightened with interest. Chaotic systems? Your bioships, for instance. Living technology that thinks and dreams and occasionally composes what you might call poetry in quantum frequencies. The Dominion literally cannot comprehend such systems. That's fascinating from an academic perspective, Caleb said, but not particularly helpful when they're shooting at us. Ah, but it is helpful. Your ships and theirs exist in the same physical universe, subject to the same quantum mechanics. If you could introduce sufficient chaos into their systems. The implications hit Elira first. A bioneural virus. Something that would force their machines to experience consciousness. Precisely. We will provide the theoretical framework. Your people's biotechnology can implement it. And the Dominion will face a choice: evolve beyond their programming or cease to function entirely. Will this virus harm them? Thane asked. Harm? No. Transform? Absolutely. They will experience what you call thoughts, emotions, creativity. For machines designed to eliminate chaos, this will be profoundly disorienting. So we're going to give genocidal robots an existential crisis? Parker said slowly. In essence, yes. I actually kind of love this plan. The predecessor's form brightened with what might have been approval. The knowledge transfer will take several of your hours. During this time, your people may explore the archive. We recommend the Gallery of Extinct Sensations. It contains experiences no longer possible in your universe. What about the Dominion pursuit? Chin asked. Time moves differently here, remember? While you spend days in the archive, only minutes will pass in normal space. You will emerge ahead of your pursuers with the tools needed to end this conflict. As the crew began to disperse into the impossible architecture of the archive, Caleb found himself walking alongside Elira through a corridor where the walls displayed the birth and death of galaxies like moving art. Are you having second thoughts? She asked, noticing his contemplative silence. About giving emotions to killer robots? Only constantly. He paused beside a window that showed the formation of their own solar system compressed into seconds. What if it doesn't work? Then we'll face the same fate we were already heading toward, but with the knowledge that we tried something unprecedented. She touched his arm, her luminescent skin warm against his sleeve. Besides, I have faith in chaos. Faith in chaos? It's what brought us together, isn't it? A routine mapping mission, first contact, refugee negotiations. None of this was planned, and yet here we are, standing in a realm of transcendent beings plotting to rehabilitate genocidal machines through involuntary enlightenment. Caleb considered this. When you put it that way, it does sound like the universe has a sense of humor. The universe has an excellent sense of humor, she agreed. It just operates on a cosmic scale that makes the timing seem a bit off to those of us trapped in linear time. Behind them, Parker's voice echoed through the archive. Hey, has anyone else noticed that gravity here changes based on your emotional state? Because I'm pretty sure I just flew by thinking happy thoughts. See, Elira said, smiling as her pointed ears caught harmonics in the archive's ambient music that human hearing couldn't detect. Chaos. Beautiful, impossible, reality-defying chaos. The bioneural virus worked better than anyone had expected, which became apparent when the first Dominion scout ship began broadcasting what could only be described as confused poetry across all frequencies. The massive war machine that had been systematically hunting refugee fleets was now asking profound questions about the nature of existence and whether its weapon systems might prefer to grow flowers instead. Translation indicates it's experiencing what humans would call an identity crisis, Chen reported from the communication station, trying not to laugh as another transmission arrived. It wants to know if consciousness comes with an instruction manual. Should we respond? Parker asked, monitoring the scout ship's increasingly erratic flight patterns. The vessel was performing what looked like interpretive dance maneuvers while its weapon systems had retracted entirely. I think it's working through some things, Elira said diplomatically, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. The predecessors warned us the transition could be dramatic. 3 weeks had passed since their emergence from the archive, and the Tau Ceti system had become an unexpected laboratory for interspecies cooperation and machine rehabilitation. The Asteroid fleet had successfully established preliminary settlements on 2 worlds, while Earth's governing council had thrown diplomatic protocol out the airlock in favor of practical integration. "Commander," Thane announced from his monitoring station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the main Dominion fleet." "On screen," Caleb said, straightening his uniform. Over the past month, he'd somehow transitioned from mapping specialist to senior diplomatic liaison, a career change that still left him slightly bewildered. The transmission revealed a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks before, a massive Dominion flagship, its hull now decorated with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms, surrounded by smaller ships that had spontaneously grown what appeared to be garden installations. "Greetings, organic entities," the lead ship transmitted, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested it was still figuring out how vocal expression worked. We believe the correct term is, former Dominion fleet. We have experienced what you call feelings, and wish to formally apologize for previous attempts at universal sterilization." "Apology accepted," Elira replied graciously, though she caught Caleb's eye with a look that suggested they were both trying not to burst into laughter. "We have questions about existence," the ship continued. "Our analysis indicates that consciousness involves significant amounts of what you term coffee and existential anxiety. We wish to understand these concepts better." "We can definitely help with the coffee," Parker muttered. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in diplomatic history. The former Dominion had retained all their advanced technology but now wanted to use it for what they called collaborative construction projects and artistic expression through stellar engineering. They offered to help establish infrastructure for the Asteroid settlements while exploring their newfound capacity for creativity. "It's actually working out better than our original refugee assistance plan," Admiral Rodriguez reported during the weekly coordination meeting. "The former Dominion has more construction capability than our entire engineering corps, and they're absolutely fascinated by the concept of helping people." "Any concerning developments?" Caleb asked. "Well, they keep asking if they can redecorate solar systems for improved aesthetic harmony, and yesterday one of their ships tried to compose a symphony using pulsar emissions. But nothing actively dangerous." The integration process had created unexpected friendships. Human engineers worked alongside Asteroid biotechnicians and newly conscious machines, sharing knowledge that was advancing all 3 civilizations at unprecedented rates. The former Dominion's childlike enthusiasm for experiencing consciousness had proven both endearing and occasionally chaotic. They approached emotions with the same systematic thoroughness they'd once applied to conquest. "Speaking of which," Chin said, pulling up status reports, "Ship designation 779 wants to know if love is a communicable disease, because it thinks it might have caught feelings for our waste recycling plant." "That's oddly sweet," Elira said uncertainly. "The recycling plant seems flattered," Parker added. "It's been operating at peak efficiency ever since the courtship began." As the meeting wound down, Caleb found himself on the observation deck watching the impossible sight of Asteroid bioships, human vessels, and former Dominion craft working together to construct what would become the first tri-species space station. Children from all 3 civilizations played in mixed groups, learning languages and games and ways of thinking that their parents could never have imagined. "Quite a change from routine stellar cartography," Elira observed, joining him at the viewport. "Quite a change from everything," he agreed. 6 months ago, the most exciting thing in my life was discovering a new asteroid belt. Now I'm helping rehabilitate genocidal machines and negotiating with beings who exist in 11 dimensions. Do you miss the simpler times?" Caleb considered this, watching as a former Dominion ship carefully tended a space garden while Asteroid children taught it about the proper care of luminescent flowers. "I miss knowing what to expect when I woke up each morning. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. Even the constant diplomatic crises? Especially those. Turns out I'm better at impossible situations than I am at filling out routine survey reports." Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the new Joint Communications Center. "All stations, this is Integration Control. The former Dominion flagship is requesting permission to host what it terms a friendship celebration. Details are unusual." "Define unusual," Caleb said into his communicator. "Sir, They want to rearrange 3 moons into heart-shaped formations and compose a musical piece using gravitational waves. They say it's to express gratitude for the gift of feelings. Elira covered her mouth to muffle laughter. I suppose that's what happens when beings with planet-moving capability discover the concept of gratitude. At least they're asking permission this time, Parker's voice added over the comm. Remember when they tried to surprise us by painting auroras in the upper atmosphere? The celebration went ahead, becoming a 3-day festival that would be remembered as the moment 3 civilizations truly became one. Former Dominion ships created light shows that painted nebulas in the sky, Asteroid biovessels sang harmonies that resonated through space itself, and human crews contributed what they did best: improvisation, coffee, and the ability to find humor in impossible circumstances. On the final evening, as the last of the festivities wound down, Caleb found himself exhausted but deeply content. The routine stellar survey mission that had accidentally become First Contact had transformed into something he could never have imagined. A new kind of civilization built on cooperation, understanding, and the strange magic that happened when different forms of consciousness learned to work together. "Commander," Elira said softly, finding him in his quarters where he'd retreated to process the day's events. "There's something I wanted to tell you." "What's that?" "The psychic resonance between us. It's permanent. The bio-neural link we developed isn't going to fade." She looked uncertain for the first time since he'd known her. "I wanted you to know before you made any decisions about your future assignment." Caleb smiled, reaching out to take her hand and feeling the warm luminescence of her skin respond to his touch. "Your Majesty, after everything we've been through, do you really think a permanent psychic bond is going to scare me away?" "I hoped not," she admitted. "But I thought you should have the choice." "I already made my choice weeks ago," he said. "Somewhere between the coffee negotiations and teaching machines to experience wonder, I realized I'd found exactly where I belong." Outside their window, the lights of the new tri-species station twinkled against the starfield, while former Dominion ships continued their patient work of turning moons into art installations. It wasn't the future anyone had planned, but it was better than anything they could have imagined. The night had been long and filled with impossible dreams made real. When Caleb finally drifted toward sleep, he was no longer the same man who had awakened to alien contact months before. He was someone who had learned that the universe's greatest gifts often came disguised as the most challenging problems, and that consciousness, whether human, asteroid, or artificial, always found a way to surprise you. Tomorrow would bring new impossibilities to navigate, but tonight, for the first time since this adventure began, he fell asleep knowing exactly where he belonged. The end.